Disclaimer: the story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. The supernatural elements and events depicted in the story are products of imagination and are intended for entertainment purposes only. Emma had never expected that moving into a new place could feel this unsettling. After the painful breakup that left her emotionally drained, she thought a change of scenery would help. The small-town apartment was perfect for starting over, cozy, affordable, and conveniently located near her new job. She hadn't anticipated the heavy silence that seemed to seep through the walls or the strange chill that lingered in the air the moment she stepped inside. The living room was spacious, with sunlight pouring through the tall windows in the afternoon. But the centerpiece was the large, antique mirror leaning against the wall. It was framed in dark wood, ornately carved with curling vines and unfamiliar symbols. Emma wasn't sure if she loved or hated it the moment she saw it. It looked out of place in her otherwise modern furniture. The previous tenant must have left it behind, she assumed. That first night, Emma tried to ignore the mirror, focusing instead on unpacking. Yet when she glanced over at it from across the room, she caught her own reflection staring back, but something felt off. Her reflection didn't quite mirror her movements perfectly. For a moment, it seemed to hesitate, like it was thinking before copying her. She shook her head, laughing nervously at herself. "Just tired," she whispered. As the days passed, Emma grew used to the mirror's presence. Still, there was an undeniable feeling every time she looked at it, an invisible weight pressing down on her chest, making her uneasy. She began avoiding direct eye contact with her reflection, especially in the quiet evenings when shadows danced around the room. Emma's friends noticed she seemed distracted when they visited, but she brushed off their concerns. The mirror was just an old thing, she told herself. She needed to focus on her new job and her healing, not imaginary fears. But late one night, as she brushed her hair in front of the mirror, she saw it clearly. Her reflection moved a fraction of a second before she did, turning its head, raising its hand, and smiling in a way that made Emma's skin crawl. The reflection's eyes seemed darker, almost hollow. She stumbled back from the mirror, heart pounding. The room was silent again, normal, but she knew something wasn't right. That night, sleep came hard as unsettling images filled her mind, shadows reaching out, whispers from behind the glass, and a cold, knowing smile that was not hers. Emma realized this mirror was not just a mirror. It was something else. Something alive. And it was watching her. The next morning, Emma woke with a lingering unease she couldn't shake. Her mind replayed the strange moment in front of the mirror, the way her reflection had moved ahead of her. She tried to dismiss it as fatigue or a trick of light, but the memory stayed vivid. Determined to convince herself it was nothing, Emma went about her morning routine. She stood before the mirror brushing her teeth, watching as her reflection mimicked her movements exactly. Or so she thought. For a split second, the reflection blinked after her, not simultaneously. Emma froze, toothbrush halfway to her mouth. She blinked again, and this time the reflection smiled, but Emma's own lips remained pressed in a tight line. The smile was small but unmistakably sinister, a slow curl of the lips that sent a chill down her spine. She dropped the toothbrush, her heart hammering. The reflection's smile didn't fade immediately, it lingered a beat too long before mimicking her neutral expression. Emma looked around the empty apartment, suddenly feeling very alone. Over the next few days, the strange behavior continued. At first, it was subtle, a blink that came too late, a glance away when Emma looked straight ahead, a smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. But then the reflection's movements began to deviate more boldly. Emma caught it moving its hand before she did, fingers twitching independently. Sometimes when she raised her arm, the reflection's hand would move in a different direction as if communicating something she couldn't understand. One morning, the reflection raised its eyebrows in mock surprise just before Emma felt a sharp pain in her temple. She began recording short videos of the mirror with her phone, capturing moments where the reflection's behavior was undeniably off. In one clip, she raised her hand slowly, the reflection's hand moved sharply and quickly before settling back. In another, she smiled tentatively, but the reflection's smile turned into a cruel sneer. Emma showed the videos to a few close friends, hoping for reassurance. They shrugged, saying it looked like tricks of light or camera glitches. But Emma couldn't ignore the deepening dread that the reflection wasn't just a mirror image anymore, it was something alive and aware. At night, the mirror seemed to watch her even when she wasn't looking. When Emma passed by it in the dark, she sometimes thought she saw a flash of movement or eyes gleaming briefly. One evening, she stood frozen in front of it, daring the reflection to move first. And it did. The reflection tilted its head slowly, deliberately. Its eyes locked onto Emma's, wide and dark. Then it raised a finger and pointed directly at her as if warning her. Emma felt a shiver rush through her body. Her reflection was no longer a copy, it was a separate entity with its own will. Desperation began to settle in. Emma tried covering the mirror with a sheet, but at night she would find the sheet pushed off or tangled on the floor. She tried moving the mirror into a corner, but no matter where she placed it, the mirror seemed to command attention. She avoided looking at it for hours, but the mirror's presence was always in the back of her mind, like a silent threat. She started sleeping with the lights on, terrified that the reflection might step out of the glass and into her room. One afternoon, while brushing her hair, she caught herself talking to the reflection in a whisper. "What do you want from me?" The reflection's lips moved slowly, eerily, and formed words she didn't understand. Emma's breath caught and she stumbled back. Her phone buzzed with a message from her coworker, pulling her back to reality. But Emma's gaze flickered to the mirror again, and the reflection winked. A small, almost playful gesture, but Emma knew it was anything but harmless. Her life was starting to revolve around the mirror. The strange behavior of her reflection was invading her thoughts, her sleep, her peace. She wondered if she was losing her mind or if something truly supernatural was unfolding. Emma knew one thing for sure: the mirror was no longer just a silent observer. It was a player in her life, and it was gaining the upper hand. By the time Emma reached the middle of her second week in the apartment, the strange behavior of her reflection had escalated beyond subtle oddities. It was no longer just delayed movements or mismatched expressions. The reflection began to act on its own with intention and purpose. One evening, as Emma was cooking dinner, she caught the reflection out of the corner of her eye. She turned quickly to look, but the reflection remained still. A few seconds later, she heard the faint clatter of a glass falling in the living room. She rushed over to find a wine glass shattered on the floor. But she hadn't dropped it. Slowly, she scanned the room and her gaze landed back on the mirror. The reflection smiled. That cold, knowing smile again. But this time it wasn't mimicking her. It was an original expression, one Emma had never worn. Heart pounding, Emma backed away from the mirror. She felt like a trapped animal being toyed with. She grabbed her phone and reviewed her recordings from the past days, watching carefully for proof. And there it was. In one clip, the reflection raised its hand and nudged a book off the table, before Emma even knew she had reached for it. Panic set in. Was her reflection moving objects in the real world? Was it somehow crossing the boundary between the glass and her reality? Over the next few days, more strange events happened. Emma noticed that lights flickered when she was near the mirror, and sometimes the reflection's eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Objects in the apartment would move by themselves, always in the direction of the mirror or near it. One terrifying night, Emma was sitting on the couch when her reflection suddenly reached out through the glass. She could see a hand press against the inside surface of the mirror as if trying to break free. Emma froze, unable to look away. The glass rippled like water, and a cold wind seemed to blow from the mirror, chilling her to the bone. She stumbled backward and covered the mirror with a thick blanket. But even then, she could feel the presence behind it. Alive, restless, and hungry for freedom. Emma's thoughts raced. Was the reflection the trapped spirit of the woman who had vanished in this apartment years ago? Had she been imprisoned inside the mirror? And if so, what did that mean for Emma? She tried to tell herself it was all in her head, a stress-induced hallucination. But the evidence was undeniable. The reflection had its own will and power to affect her world. That night, Emma's dreams were haunted by the woman from the mirror. In her dreams, the reflection spoke in whispers, pleading for release, warning Emma of danger, and promising terrible consequences if she refused. When Emma awoke, she noticed bruises on her wrists as if someone had grabbed her in her sleep. The sense of dread intensified. She couldn't trust herself anymore. Not when the reflection could act without her control. Despite her fear, Emma knew she had to find answers. She turned to the internet, forums, and old newspaper archives to learn about the mirror and its past owners. As the reflection's independent actions became more frequent and aggressive, Emma's resolve hardened. She wasn't going to be a prisoner of the glass. But confronting the reflection would mean facing a darkness she couldn't yet understand. Emma sat hunched over her laptop in the dim glow of the apartment's lone desk lamp, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed in search after search. The more she dug, the more unsettling the picture became. The mirror was no ordinary relic. It carried a dark and mysterious history that seemed to ripple with every new piece of information. Her first clue came from a faded newspaper article from 15 years ago buried deep in an online archive. The headline caught her breath: "Local woman disappears without a trace, last seen near Elm Street apartment." The photo showed a young woman with sharp eyes and a determined smile standing in front of an old Victorian house, the same building where Emma now lived. Emma's heart pounded. The missing woman's name was Evelyn, and as she read further, details emerged that were eerily specific. Evelyn had been the previous owner of the mirror now in Emma's living room. The article suggested that Evelyn had been obsessed with the mirror, claiming it showed her things no one else could see. Neighbors had reported hearing strange noises and seeing flickering lights in the apartment, but Evelyn vanished without explanation shortly after. Curiosity gnawed at Emma. Could Evelyn's fate be tied to the mirror? Was the reflection she saw really Evelyn's trapped soul? She had to know more. She searched for any records of the mirror itself, but found nothing official, only whispered rumors on obscure forums about cursed mirrors and trapped souls. One forum thread described an ancient belief that mirrors could act as portals or prisons for spirits, reflecting not just images but capturing the essence of those who gazed too long. Emma read stories of people who had lost themselves to mirrors, their reflections becoming separate, malevolent beings. The more she learned, the more she realized how little she knew about the object she had unwittingly invited into her home. The mirror wasn't just a piece of furniture, it was a vessel for something ancient, powerful, and dangerous. Emma found herself obsessively reading late into the night. The mirror's frame, with its strange carvings, matched descriptions she found in a historical book about occult artifacts in the region. The symbols were said to be protective wards, but protective against what? Or perhaps they were meant to contain something inside. The logical part of Emma screamed that she was chasing shadows, that the fear was twisting reality. But deep down, she felt the truth clawing at her sanity. The mirror was the key, and the reflection was not just a reflection. She tried to share her findings with friends, but the words sounded crazy even to her own ears. They urged her to see a therapist, suggesting stress from the breakup was causing hallucinations. But Emma refused to dismiss what she saw. One night, after hours of research, she sat staring at the mirror again, feeling the heavy silence pressing down. She spoke aloud, trembling, "Evelyn, if you're there, what do you want from me?" The reflection shifted. For the first time, it looked less like Emma and more like the woman from the photograph, pale, with hollow eyes and a desperate expression. Then it reached out a hand and Emma felt a sudden coldness flood the room. Her breath caught as the reflection whispered words she could barely hear. "Help me, free me." Emma's mind raced. Could she risk helping this trapped soul? What if the reflection was lying? What if it wanted to trap her too? Her world was spinning faster into a nightmare, but one thing was certain: ignoring the mirror wasn't an option anymore. To survive, she had to understand the mirror's history, the story of Evelyn, and the secrets hidden within the glass. Emma's nights grew darker, weighed down by the oppressive presence lurking behind the glass. The mirror was no longer a passive observer. It had started to reach beyond its frame and interfere with her life in terrifying ways. One evening, as Emma prepared to settle into bed, she noticed something was wrong. The room felt colder than usual, the air thick with a heavy silence. She glanced at the mirror, half expecting the usual unsettling glint in the reflection's eyes. But this time, the reflection didn't just look back, it moved independently. Slowly, the reflection raised a hand and reached out toward Emma. She instinctively stepped back, heart pounding. Suddenly, objects near the mirror began to tremble, the lamp flickered and then shattered, shards scattering across the floor. Emma barely managed to dodge the flying glass. Panic surged through her veins as she realized the reflection wasn't confined to simple gestures anymore, it was exerting power in the real world. From that night on, the strange incidents escalated. Doors slammed shut on their own, lights flickered without cause, and Emma often found her belongings rearranged or missing. The mirror's influence was growing stronger. One afternoon, as Emma sat at her desk trying to focus on work, she heard a faint whisper echoing through the apartment. It wasn't coming from any source she could identify. Only the mirror seemed to carry the voice, low and sibilant. She moved closer, eyes fixed on the reflection, which now wore a twisted smile. The reflection's lips moved in silent words, but Emma felt the meaning clearly. "You're mine." Emma's breath caught. She tried to tear her eyes away, but the mirror seemed to hold her captive. Days later, When she looked into the glass, the reflection wasn't just mimicking her anymore. It was leading. If Emma lifted her hand, the reflection moved first, as if guiding her actions. Sometimes, she found herself moving against her will, her body acting as a puppet for the reflection's will. In moments like those, Emma felt utterly powerless. She tried everything to resist, covering the mirror with blankets, sealing it with tape, even attempting to move it to the basement. But the mirror returned to its place each time, as if bound to the apartment and to her. The reflection's control extended beyond the mirror's immediate vicinity. Emma caught glimpses of her own face twisted into cruel expressions she hadn't made, heard herself whisper threats in the night, and felt the cold touch of fingers brushing her skin when no one was there. The sense of invasion was terrifying. The reflection was breaking down the barrier between image and reality, between self and other. One particularly harrowing night, Emma woke to find herself standing in front of the mirror, her hand raised as if to touch the glass, though she had no memory of getting out of bed. The reflection smiled and nodded approvingly. Emma's desperation grew with each passing day. She began to isolate herself, afraid of hurting others or losing herself completely. Phone calls went unanswered, visits declined. The mirror was taking everything from her. Her last hope was to confront the reflection head-on. But even that idea filled her with dread. What if the reflection was stronger than she imagined? What if it didn't want to be freed, but to replace her? Despite the fear, Emma knew she couldn't run any longer. The mirror had taken control, and if she didn't act soon, she might never get it back. As days turned into restless nights, Emma's grip on reality began to slip. The mirror's hold over her tightened like an invisible noose, suffocating every moment of peace she once had. Her reflection was no longer just a silent double. It had become an active force, infiltrating her thoughts and actions in ways that left her questioning everything, including her own sanity. Emma's paranoia grew with each passing day. She started noticing things that couldn't be explained by logic or reason. Shadows seemed to move just beyond the corner of her eyes, and sometimes, she swore she heard faint whispers calling her name. The mirror loomed over her life like a dark presence, always watching, always waiting. Her friends reached out several times, concerned by her withdrawal. She ignored their texts and calls, retreating further into the isolation of her apartment. Emma was afraid to let anyone inside, afraid that the reflection might hurt them or that they would think she was losing her mind. Every night, sleep became a battlefield. Emma would lie awake, staring at the mirror from across the room, willing herself not to look directly into it. But the reflection always seemed to beckon her, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark, promising secrets and threats in equal measure. One night, Emma found herself standing in front of the mirror again, unable to resist its pull. The reflection's face twisted into a cruel grin, and then, to her horror, it began to speak, not with words but through Emma's own voice. The words were chilling, laced with menace. "You belong to me now." The voice was hers, yet not hers. It echoed inside her mind, drowning out her own thoughts. Emma staggered back, clutching her head as a wave of dizziness swept over her. She realized that the reflection could speak through her, controlling her voice and perhaps even her actions. This terrifying discovery shattered what little confidence she had left. Emma tried desperately to resist, but the reflection was cunning. It whispered doubts and fears, twisting her memories and emotions. It reminded her of every failure, every lonely moment, every hurt she had tried to forget. The mirror became a mirror of her soul, exposing every crack and fracture and using them to break her down. In the days that followed, Emma's behavior became erratic. She'd lash out at imaginary threats, break down in tears for no reason, and sometimes wake up in places she didn't remember going to. The boundary between herself and the reflection blurred. One evening, she found herself speaking to the mirror as if it were a person. "Why are you doing this to me? What do you want?" The reflection's answer was a slow, chilling smile, followed by a whispered promise, "Forever." Paranoia gripped Emma like a vice. She stopped trusting her own reflection or even her own senses. Every shadow could be the reflection's shadow. Every whispered sound might be its voice. She felt trapped in a nightmare with no escape. She kept a journal, trying to anchor herself with written words, but even the act of writing became dangerous. Sometimes the ink would smear on its own, or words she didn't write would appear on the page, messages from the reflection, taunting and threatening. Emma's last link to the outside world frayed. She stopped answering calls, stopped leaving her apartment. The mirror had become a prison, and she was the prisoner within. But despite the darkness closing in, a small spark of hope remained. Emma vowed not to let the reflection win. Somewhere beneath the fear and confusion, she still believed she could fight back. She just didn't know how yet. Emma's world had become a shadowed battlefield where every glance at the mirror threatened to swallow her whole. But beneath the fear and confusion, a fierce determination began to rise. She knew she couldn't let the reflection control her any longer. It was time to face the entity trapped behind the glass, to confront the dark secret she had uncovered. She prepared herself carefully. Emma lit candles around the mirror, hoping the flickering light would weaken the shadowy presence. She cleared the room of distractions and took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. This was a moment of reckoning. "Evelyn," Emma whispered, using the name she had discovered through her research. "If you're still here, show me the truth. What happened to you? Why are you trapped?" For a long moment, the reflection remained still, its eyes locked onto hers with a mixture of sorrow and anger. Then, slowly, the mirror began to ripple as if it were water disturbed by a stone. The image of Evelyn emerged more clearly, a woman caught between worlds, neither fully alive nor dead. A voice echoed in Emma's mind, soft but urgent. "I was cursed, trapped by those who feared what I knew. The mirror is my prison, but also my prison guard. Help me break free, and the truth will be yours." Emma's heart raced. She realized the mirror's power was bound to a curse cast long ago, one that imprisoned Evelyn's spirit within the glass. The dark presence was both victim and captor, desperate for freedom but dangerous if released. "Tell me what to do," Emma said, voice trembling but resolute. The reflection's eyes glowed faintly. "You must find the key, a relic hidden where it all began, beneath the old elm tree outside this building. It holds the power to break the curse or doom us both." Emma swallowed her fear and nodded. She felt a strange connection to Evelyn, a mix of empathy and dread. The mirror had been a trap, but also a warning. The next day, Emma ventured outside with cautious hope. The old elm tree stood tall, its gnarled branches casting long shadows in the afternoon sun. Beneath its roots, she found a small, ornate box buried in the earth. Inside was a delicate pendant inscribed with the same symbols she had seen on the mirror's frame. Returning to her apartment, Emma held the pendant up to the mirror. The glass shimmered and the reflection reached out once more. This time, the hand didn't tremble or ripple, it steadied. "I am ready," Evelyn's voice whispered. Emma prepared for what came next, knowing that freeing Evelyn might release something uncontrollable, but refusing to act felt like surrender. As the pendant touched the mirror, a surge of light burst forth. The room flooded with warmth and sound, and the glass cracked, spiderwebbing like frozen lightning. Emma shielded her eyes as the presence within the mirror began to shift, no longer an enemy but a soul seeking peace. When the light faded, the reflection was gone. Emma collapsed, exhausted but relieved. For the first time in weeks, the apartment felt still. The mirror was just a mirror again. But Emma knew this was only the beginning of a new chapter, one where the truth had been revealed but the shadows might still linger. The first light of dawn filtered through Emma's apartment window, casting a soft glow over the room that had been the battleground of her darkest fears. The mirror, now cracked but silent, sat quietly against the wall, its power broken, its curse lifted. Emma lay back on her couch, feeling a mix of exhaustion and relief wash over her. The oppressive presence that had haunted her every waking moment was gone. For the first time in weeks, she could breathe without the weight of dread crushing her chest. But the experience had changed her. She knew that the darkness she faced wasn't just about a haunted mirror or a trapped spirit. It was about confronting fears that lurk in the shadows of the mind, about the thin line between reality and nightmare. Days passed and Emma slowly began to reclaim her life. She called her friends back, apologized for the silence, and started to reconnect with the world outside her apartment. Each step felt fragile but necessary. She kept the cracked mirror not out of fear, but as a reminder, a symbol of the battle she had endured and the courage it took to face the unknown. Emma also found peace in knowing she had helped Evelyn's spirit find freedom. The woman who had been lost, trapped in a prison of glass and shadows, was finally at rest. Yet, as Emma reflected on everything, a lingering question remained: had the curse truly ended, or had it only been delayed? Sometimes, when the light hit the cracked mirror just right, she thought she could see a faint shimmer, a whisper of movement, a flash of a face not quite her own. Emma shivered and turned away, choosing to focus on the present. Her reflection no longer moved on its own. It no longer whispered threats or beckoned her into darkness. It was simply her, a true reflection and nothing more. Emma had survived the nightmare and emerged stronger. The mirror's secrets had been uncovered, the curse broken. But the memory of those haunted days lingered, a shadow etched into her soul. In the quiet moments, she understood one truth clearly: sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones that live within ourselves, and only by facing them can we find the light. 44.